firing crazy and it was a ricochet or shrapnel. So some of them argue, they take the single bullet and they say, we need to analyze this bullet and where it came from. There's a possibility that this bullet was actually fired by somebody else. We still don't know who fired this actual bullet. And even the way they word it, if you remember, there was a murder of a journalist last year, a few years ago, Shireen Abu Aqla, who was a journalist for, I think, for Thomas, for what? Al-Jazeera, sorry. She was a journalist for Jazeera, and if you remember how they reported on it, they reported that a bullet impacted her. Where the bullet came from, no one knows. It just, there was an impact with a bullet. And this is all we actually know about the thing. So they come and they begin to dissect it in a very clinical way. And when I say clinical, they're almost removed from it. This is very similar to the way people become clinical when they study the tragedy of Fatimiyyah Zahra salawatullahi alayha. All of a sudden they become historians and archaeologists, and they become clinical in the manner sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. They become clinical in the way that they study how this happened. For example, all of a sudden the concept of, was there doors in that time or was there no doors? Was there a door on both sides of the masjid or was there not a door on both sides of the masjid? Who was it exactly that did what? Who was it exactly that did exactly which thing? So all of a sudden they become sort of removed from the whole incident, and that just makes the history of the tragedy of Fatimiyyah Zahra salawatullahi alayha cloudier. But when we come back, when we remove, and this is an Islamic concept, if you have doubt and certainty, you always go back to the certainty. You always go back to the certainty. With certainty, we know Rasulullah said that no woman of the believers will have a greater calamity than Az-Zahra salawatullahi alayha. So if in history we have no narration that speaks about the tragedy of Fatimiyyah Zahra salawatullahi alayha, where is it? If it doesn't exist, it has to be somewhere. The Prophet said this is something that would actually happen. This is something that would eventuate. And we see that it's something that apparently didn't eventuate. When I say that we look at it in a clinical manner, the problem with looking at it in a clinical manner is you become unrealistic and you fall for the terms. And you fall for the words that come about. And you just accept that. You say, oh, this is, for example, self-defense. This is an airstrike. And that's it. All of a sudden, you're not looking at that. Hold on a minute. These 60 people that died had people that loved them in one hit, in one building. Or when they've erased the whole family from the register, these were actual people. If you look at a lot of the reports, for example, from an Australian context, us living in Australia, and Australia was colonized by the English, and eventually it's the country that you see it is today. But for it to grow into this country, there was many massacres. Many massacres of the indigenous peoples. And when you look at the reports of the massacres of the indigenous people, they read very clinically. The way you look at them, they're very clinical. They'll say, for example, we sent out a contingent of 10 troops. At the head of it was, Lieutenant Colonel Smithers, and he had, he took with him a sergeant, and he took with him an armory man, and they took these sorts of weapons with them. And they trekked the Australian bushland for many a day until they apprehended the suspects, and brought back evidence, which basically means they hacked off the heads of them to bring them back to prove that they had killed them. But they don't say that. And then when you say hacking of heads, nobody talks about hacking of heads in the detail. Did they speak about how they protected themselves, for example, from the blood spurts? Did they speak about how, for example, maybe someone had to hold them down? Did they speak about? No. Why? Because they're being clinical. And by being clinical, you remove the human aspect. And by removing the human aspect, you tell the narrative how you want to tell it, and you make it sound righteous. Just like when they hit hospitals and residential buildings in Lebanon, they say, Hezbollah target, Hezbollah target, Hezbollah target. Who's Hezbollah, Dad? Oh, they're some terrorists. They're a terrorist organization. You hear the word terrorist? Terrorist means dehumanized. That's it. Terrorist means someone that doesn't deserve to belong or to exist. And we look back at the calamity of Fatima salawatullahi alayha. This is exactly the same thing. Someone comes and says, oh, in this narration, Kunfud, la'natullahi alayh, kicked the door down. In this narration, for example, why did Fatima answer the door? Where was the zeal of Imam Ali alayhi salam? Where was the ghira of Imam Ali that he allowed her to open the door? Shouldn't he go and open the door? Who was it? Was it this guy, Al-Mughira, who slapped the face of Fatima salawatullahi alayha? Or was it Ibn al-Khattab who hit Fatima with the hilt of the sword? So people look at this and say, you know what, there's too many conflicting things, let's take it apart. There was this alim, he gave an example. He said, if you get a call from the school, the principal calls you up and he says to you, your child has been hit. And so you come to the school and you say, I want to know what happened. You sit in the principal's office and they bring the witnesses. And they bring Timmy from year 3. He comes up and he says, I witnessed it. What did you witness? I witnessed that that this boy slapped your son or your daughter. And then they bring someone else from year 5. He says, yes, I witnessed somebody. He kicked your child. Another one, he says, yeah, I witnessed somebody, he threw a bottle at your child. So the principal says these are 3 conflicting stories, case closed. It mustn't have happened, your child mustn't have got injured. Would any of us accept this story and walk away? Would we just say, oh yeah, then they're 2 conflicting stories? Why? Because of the light that you look at it. In the same way, when people come and say, oh, these are conflicting things, no. As a parent, you would say that means my son was slapped, my son was kicked, and somebody threw something at my child. And I want justice now. This is what would happen. And this is the light that one must look at when he deals with these historical matters, particularly things that the Prophet ﷺ prophesied about. We can't let these terms and these made-up definitions dictate the way that we look about the history of Fatima salawatullahi alayha. When we sit there, they make it sound that like 3 guys came and stood outside of the house. And then Imam Ali alayhi salam was, wal-'ayadu billah, hiding, or they say, I would never allow this if this happened in my house. This was a siege. This was a siege. They had contracted a mercenary army from the A'rab of Banu Salim, and they funded their coup with the money of Fadak and Al-Awali. This is how they funded the coup. And when they came to the house of Fatima salawatullahi alayha, they had constructed a lie that was a precedent that would allow them to attack the house of Fatima. The lie that they constructed was there is a conspiracy happening in the house of Fatima, when really their goal was, we want Imam Ali alayhi salam to make bay'ah. And so when they gathered and they placed the house under siege, someone heard the voice of Fatima al-Zahra. She never answered or opened the door. He realized that she was near, and this is how the attack happened. It's not as simple as they were standing there and they were waiting for some sort of permission. On the contrary, Fatima salawatullahi alayha, before we talk further about the details of what happened to Fatima salawatullahi alayha, I would like you to look at this narration of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and this is a narration that's narrated by all parties. By all parties. This is a mutawatir hadith. There is no room for negating this hadith. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله فاطمة بضعة مني فمن أغضبها أغضبني. He says, Fatima is a part of me. Whoever angers her has angered me. When the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that Fatima is a part of me, this is the problem. You know, sometimes we hear narrations by Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. and we overlook them. We don't give them the weight that they deserve. Remember when the man came to Rasulullah and he said, advise me, and Rasulullah said to him, لا تغضب, don't get angry. And then he said, advise me some more. So yeah, I've taken that one. I'm cool with that. Rasulullah, give me another one. He says, لا تغضب. He says, yeah, okay, give me another one. He says, لا تغضب. 3 times. Perhaps the reason the Prophet said this to him is because he didn't take the words as heavily as he should have. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was giving him some advice that was heavy advice. It's like when somebody calls me and they say, someone has placed a magic spell on me, or there is a jinn that is bothering me. Do you have anything that removes this? So I tell them, Surah Al-Falaq, Surah Al-Nas, done, finished. And they're not convinced. They're not convinced. Give me something bigger. Give me something greater. They want to hear something that is more complex. They want to find the golden egg on the mount of I don't know what and bring it back, and this will remove the magic that's upon them, or something along those lines. This is the issue. That they take it lightly. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says that Fatima bid'atun minni, that she is a bad'a of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, a part of Rasulullah. That means that everything that is associated with Rasulullah, Fatima salawatullahi alayha is a part of that. Rasulullah tells Jabir, the first thing that Allah created is the nur, his nur. And that nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created me from that nur. Fatima salawatullahi alayha is a part of that nur. The revelation that the Prophet received, Fatima is a part of this. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Rasulullah is an exemplar, Fatima salawatullahi alayha is a part of this. The revelation, Fatima is a part of this. ما ينطق عن الهوى, Fatima is a part of this. دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين أو أدنى, that he came to a point of nearness in the Mi'raj, where Jibreel said, Ya Rasulullah, I cannot go past this point or my wings will burn. Only you can go past this point, Ya Rasulullah. Fatima is a part of this. This is the status of Fatima salawatullahi alayha. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And this is another hadith. See, these are things that are not just important for us. They're important for the general Muslims to look into this and see the status and the position and the importance of Fatima salawatullahi alayha. And we need to answer one sincere question. Every Muslim on the face of this earth needs to answer a sincere question from the bottom of their heart. Either I am a Muslim and I follow Sunnah Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, or I don't. Or I follow Sunnah plus. That I look at the Sunnah of Rasulullah plus whatever I want to add to it. You either follow the tradition of Rasulullah or you don't. This is the tradition of Rasulullah. Listen to this. This hadith has been narrated overwhelmingly in our books and within the books of the general Muslims. The Holy Prophet says, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says, أول شخص يدخل الجنة فاطمة صلوات الله عليها. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. He says the first person that enters paradise is Fatima salawatullahi alayha. Subhanallah, the name of Fatima, of the meanings of the name, is that Allah called her Fatima because فُطِمُوا شِيعَتُهَا عَنْ مَعْرِفَتِهَا, that her Shia have been weaned off understanding her, having the full and true knowledge of her. That her Shia have been weaned off the fire of hell. There is no way the lovers of Fatima, and Fatima salawatullahi alayha, she is a criterion. You know, these criteria that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment will show their elevation and their status. Khafidatun rafi'ah. Fatima al-Zahra, in this world, her status has been stripped of her completely. No status, to the point, subhanallah. I'm sure you all saw that video of the mosque in Idlib. At the beginning, before these HTS people, ISIS Plus, invaded Syria, they found a mosque in Idlib. It was called Masjid Fatimiyyah Zahra salawatullahi alayha. It's a masjid where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worshipped. Because this is what people do in a masjid. Just to show you, when people over-exaggerate a title or an attribute of themselves, this means that this is an attribute that is probably far away from. For example, if I introduce myself as I'll say, oh, my name is Ali, and I'm a professional fighter. Trained about 6 years MMA, about 9 years boxing, which I haven't trained any of that, but I'm just saying, so please don't try and fight me when I get down. But imagine someone always, and people know me for my courage. Hi, do you know that I'm a courageous guy? I'm a courageous guy, and I just tell people that. This means it's very likely the guy is not courageous at all. It's just like when people call themselves like an organization, they say, we are the free movement of whatever. Highly likely that they are not free at all. Or when they say, for example, this is the masjid of Allah. We worship Allah in this place. It means it's very unlikely that Allah is worshipped in this place. Simple as that. Because Allah has a house. It's called the Kaaba. In Baytihil Muharram. Even that is not called Masjid Allah. وَأَمَّا الْمَسَاجِدِ لِلَّهِ. That all of the mosques are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but none are called that. It's called Masjid al-Haram, Masjid Nabawi Sharif, Masjid Qiba, Masjid al-Shajara. Does that mean they worship the tree in Masjid al-Shajara? In Abiyar Ali, on the outskirts of the Medina? So they actually went to the effort. Imagine, there's children starving in Syria. There's, I don't know what other problems they have. They don't have, especially in Idlib, they have all of these issues. But the one thing that stood out for them is there is a mosque named after Fatimiyyah Zahra. They went and got power tools and they erased the name of Fatima off the side and they made a video. They made a video of it, look at this, and then they called it Masjid al-Izzatu Lillah. They asked them why. They said, we're afraid people might worship other than Allah here. Because this is their whole movement, is how much ghira they have for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what the whole movement is, subhanallah. But subhanallah, that it happened in the days of Fatimiyyah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's like a message from Allah showing us that this didn't finish. That the history that we speak about, when they come and tell you, you're talking about ancient history, it didn't finish. Furthermore, I will tell you something. And I don't have enough time to elaborate, but inshallah you'll get the point. The authority of every authority goes back to that basis. Every authority, every government that was formed by these empires, have a look at not so far modern / ancient history. All of the countries that were colonized and were made by monarchies. These monarchies based their authority on divine inspiration, on divine choice. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose them. Go and look at the history of every monarchy that there is in Europe. And every king and every queen. This is what they base it on. That they are taking the crown from the prophets of God and they are now wearing the crown. Who gave them that authority or the audacity to take this away? The people who attacked the house of Fatima salawatullah alayha. This is who gave them that audacity. The people who went, and at that time, this is what they understood would be the only thing that could give them that power and that authority. Because they can't hide this. They can't hide that they are sitting in the position that's not their position, and the righteous, the ones who are rightfully holders of this position, you can't make them disappear. They couldn't answer questions. Let's send them to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. But did Imam Ali alayhi salam have any position? He had no position. And when they had completed their plan of stealing the righteous position of Caliph, of Imam Ali alayhi salam, of Hujjatullah al-Ard, they took this position. They weren't comfortable even with that. They said, we need to get the bay'ah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And so they went to the house of Ali and they said, we are going to set fire to the house of Ali. When they came and they brought all of the timber towards the house of Ali to set fire to the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, they were close and they could hear the noise. Fatima salawatullahi alayha, she had one important task. Her task was the protection of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Did you know when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi came to tell the people on Jabal Abi Qubays, next to the Mas'a, Safa wal Marwa, he stood up and he told the people that I say to you that there is no God except for Allah. قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ تُفْلِحُوا. They began to throw stones at him. So when the Prophet escaped their assault, Sayyidah Khadija came looking for him in a long narration, and she took him to her house and she hid him. They followed to the house of Sayyidah Khadija and they began to throw rocks. Sayyidah Khadija came out and she said, "This is the house of a woman, how dare you?" And do you know what they did? They stopped throwing rocks. And they lowered their heads from shame, because it was shameful for the Arabs to do something like this. But the people who came to the house of Fatima, when Fatima from behind the door said to them that this is the house of Fatima, within this is Al-Hasan wal-Hussein, they said, "Wa'in," even so. And they began to place the timbers on the house of Fatima and set them alight. When they heard the voice of Fatima behind the door, they kicked the door, and he said, "I felt someone behind it. I assumed it was Fatima." He crushed the ribs of Sayyid al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha. The child, the infant Muhsin, had dropped from, she miscarried her infant Muhsin in the blood that was around her, and she ran even with this pain to save Amir al-Mu'mineen. Let me fast forward you to an important point. When Fatima salawatullahi alayha, she was close to her demise, and she told Ali, "Come near me, I have something to tell you." When she came near, she couldn't even speak, she began to cry. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says to her, "Oh Fatima, what is it that makes you cry?" He says, "You were going to the Jannah after this." She says, "I cry to what they will do to you after I leave." Because Fatima knows that she is the protection of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says to her, "Whatever will happen to me is nothing. صغير في ذات الله, that it's nothing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will handle everything that I would handle." Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi alayh, that he said in Khutbat al-Shaqshaqiyya that even though I had a thorn in my eye, he said, and I had a bristle in my throat, I still was patient for years, waiting for this, even through this pain. Ali ibn Abi Talib, through every action he went through, he was patient. Do you know when he was hit by Ibn Muljim on the 19th night of Shahr Ramadan, even Jibreel, subhanallah, when in Ziyarat al-Nahiya, when they say ta'ajjabat min sabrika malaikatu samawat for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, the angels, Jibreel, the archangels, called out, "Tahaddamat wallahi arkan al-huda," and Amir al-Mu'mineen said what? "Fustu wa rabbil Kaaba." But what was the state of Amir al-Mu'mineen when he was in the masjid? And as he is sitting there, two young boys enter the masjid, Al-Hasan wal-Hussein. They say, "Father, Fatima is gone." They say that Imam Ali alayhi salam, he fell to the floor. This Imam, who nobody would come in front of him except he would defeat them and place them on the floor. Amir al-Mu'mineen fell onto the floor. The only way they could awake Amir al-Mu'mineen was by placing water on his face, from how grievous the news that he had received of Fatima. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ.
لما علم الحسن والحسين بوفاة أمهما فاطمة، هرعا إلى مسجد رسول الله، فاستقبلهما أبوهما علي، وضمهما إلى صدره، وعاد بهما إلى الدايا، وأقبل نحو جثمان الزهراء كأني به يقول بقلب مكسور حيدر من وصله، وكشف عن وجه فاطم قللها، على خد دموعة تتحادر لجلها، يشوف بفاطمة نازل أجلها، ورأى ما كانت تخفيه عنه الزهراء، رأى الضلع المكسور، يشاهد عينها المطفية حمرة، يشاهد عينها المطفية حمرة، وعلى خدها أثر مرسومة طبرة. علي الفاق، علي الفاق على الكونين صبره، على مصاب الزكية ضاق صدره. ثم بعد ذلك غسل جثمانها ووضعها في نعشها، بظهر محني حملها وشال روحه، بنعيشها وتنسمع والنات نوحه، يخاطب سلوته وبلسم جروحه، مو وقت الوداع ووقت روحه. ثم بعد ذلك حفر قبر بضعة رسول الله، ونزل معها إلى ملحودة قبرها، يودعها بتلك الكلمات: نفسي على زفراتها محبوسة، نفسي على زفراتها محبوسة، يا ليتها خرجت مع الزفرات. بذاك الليل حدار بين القبور، فوق خدود دمع العين منثور، بهيدة وياها يدري الضلع مكسور، يوسدها على يا خدها مسطور، يوسدها على يا خدها مسطور. فلما وسدها على خدها هاج به الحزن والأسى، لما حل بوديعة رسول الله، وكأني به يقول: أنا الوقت الشدد معروف صيتي، علي والدنيا تتباهى بحميتي، لو ما شتفت عزمي وصيتي، فلا واحد تجرى وداس بيتي، فلا واحد تجرى وداس بيتي. مأجورين إن شاء الله. قم على حيلك كواس الزهر بهاي الليلة. ولعز